grandfather walked across the McCrae farm, now Cedar Hill Golf Course, to get the doctor. Alas, the doctor was drunk. So my maternal grandfather returned home via the McCrae property to find himself a father to a baby girl.
Eva. She will be 93 in September, and I will be in December 31st, New Year's Day. Imagine that, and twins. And Scottish people always celebrated New Year's more than Christmas, you know. What a gift. My mom cried and said, "How am I going to feed all these two babies?" So her sister said to her, "Oh well, don't worry. The good Lord that sent them will look after them. And I'm still here, but not my sister."
I grew up on Albina, and we moved out to Viaduct in Interurban when I was about 13 years old. And I thought my mom and dad were moving me into the middle of nowhere. And I would never, ever see any of my friends ever again.
Charlie Wooten gave my dad 5 acres on the Old West Road, free and clear, with a tar paper shack, pole rafters, not much, you know, like about a 10-foot deep well that went dry all the time. And so that, my mom said that's the best thing they ever did, was get out of Hawk. You know, there's no payment. She always pictured every time a car came up the driveway, she thought, is she coming to collect the money? Which she didn't have, you know.
But remember when the ringing of your phone just would stop you dead in your tracks. And could it be for you? Perhaps it was the party line. Or even worse, it could be ringing for the other 7 people on the party line. Do you remember that? 8 people on the party line?
But we weren't wanting. The house had been raised. My mother and I dug the basement with coal shovels on our hands and knees. And gradually we had enough money where we could rent screw jacks. Some of you may remember them. They weighed about 85 pounds each. And we were able to get, as I remember, 12 from a firm in Victoria that actually delivered them because we had no way of getting them at that point. We were renting them by the day, and all I can remember my dad was saying, if you can dig a little longer, get another hour in, we can probably save another day at 25 cents a jack and get them back into the rental agency sooner. But we dug the basement, and we gradually raised, and we dug, and we raised, and we dug, and we raised, and we got it raised up. And while it's up in the air, I thought, thank God that's over. Now you got to pour the forms and the foundation.
And see, when I was very young, in Greater Cordova Bay, there wouldn't have been more than about 12.5 families lived there. But
and you know what the bath did at night was every Sunday night. Galvanized tin on the middle of the floor. Get water off the stove. Every 4th night you got to go first. They all bathed in the same water. Yeah, that's the way it was. Wooden sidewalks to the biffy. God, I hated that.
Well, we lived right beside the big reservoir and filter beds and all that stuff.
Never even had my own bedroom. I said, you kids are so lucky you've all got your own rooms. I never had my own room, ever. Got married, still don't have it.
Because we had a dairy farm there, my dad's place, And it was work 7 days a week, milking cows in the morning by hand, at night, and then you go to school. You get up in the morning, say 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, go out and milk cows and come in and wash up and have breakfast and change your clothes and go to school. As soon as you got to school, you had to come home. I had to do more of it because I was the oldest. You had to get hay in for the cows and bring the cows in and all that. And the cows used to be up here at the pool. When I was a little guy, apparently I used to go and open the gates and the cows would all come home. Yeah, that was great things.
Chores. We used to chop wood all the time. Sometimes we chopped our foot or something.
Well, I was lucky. My dad didn't believe women should be in the barn. And I wanted to learn to milk a cow. And he'd say, no, once you start, you're never going to be able to quit. But anyway, I tried it. And so I don't remember he was there. But I tried it, and of course, in 2.5 seconds, I ended up in the gutter. So I wasn't doing something right. So that was the end. I said, he's right, and I was wrong.
And our first cow that we got was a nice, gentle Jersey cow. She was a sweetheart, and I learned to milk her, and did well, and I don't know what happened to her, but she was replaced by a Jersey Guernsey, and she was huge. She turned out to be the cow from hell. I hated her, just hated her. She had a mind of her own. There wasn't a fence built she couldn't go through, and of course we all know the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. Well, she thought it would be greener maybe a mile up the road as well, or I recovered her on Interurban Road, I recovered her on Beaver Lake Road, and lots of places closer than that. And of course, once you find her, she'd look at you like, oh, okay. So you'd put a rope on her and try and lead her home. Well, she'd come on her own conditions. Well, maybe I'll stop and eat this, and I'm tugging, and she wasn't nasty out there, but she just had a mind of her own, and it got to the point where I would be late for school often enough that the teacher would look at me and say, "Cow?" I'd say, "Yes." "Sit down."
Did you have to make butter?
Yes, churning, we sure did. I remember. We all had to take turns at that.
We had a fellow that used to sell meat. He'd run up and down the streets in his little truck, and he would sell small cuts of meat, and my mother would go out with a plate, and so would other mothers, and buy meat from his back of his truck. I doubt if any of it was really iced. And he would yell at the top of his lungs, "Butcher," and of course they'd all open the doors and out they'd come. And later on, he built a little small grocery store, or meat market, really.
And us kids, they had schools of grills used to come through in the waters in late August, early September. We get off the school bus and go and get some of Dad's rowboats and go out and, oh heck, you could get these grills, which are just young coho salmon. You don't catch them anymore, about like that, 6 or 8 every evening, which helped with the menu. Dad was a great hunter, pheasant.
Yep. I used to get pheasants and quail. My dad would say to my mom, "Do you want a pheasant for tomorrow night?" She'd say, "Yeah." He'd go down there and get a cock pheasant or nothing. Now you don't even see one. There's a few quail around, but there's no cock pheasants anymore. None of them are around. They used to hunt deer too. I mean, they used to be after the apples, and Like my mother used to can the venison all the time. My dad would get a couple of deer a year and they'd can it all. Everything was canned. He had no freezers. She had a room about, I'd say 12 by 12 with shelves on 3 sides, and they'd be loaded in the wintertime for garden stuff and meat and everything else. Chicken and everything. A lot of that stuff, like chickens and that, they used to say it was chicken for Sunday night, to kill one on Saturday and have it for Sunday night. Used to raise geese too.
And you could go down to the dairy, which we did on occasion, and you could buy a pint of milk or a quart of milk, and you would have the little paper tops or cardboardy tops that they would put on, and most of the dairies had their own with the name, and quite often the kids used to love to collect them. And you could spin them.
You know, they talk about bullying today. We were bullies too when we were kids, because the fact Billy had red hair, we gave him a bad time.
Saanich in 1952, I became part of the first graduating class from Royal Oak High School, the new high school. Robert Price was the principal. I used to mention it was Miss Rice. And she and I didn't hit it off very well at Mount Newton, and we hit it off even less well at Royal Oak.
Get personal. It was all about the boys, of course. And I think I think Heather and I were reminiscing about people in the area, and I think I dated her cousin or something.
Anyway, we had Mr., what was his name, Harmon? Do you remember Mr. Harmon? He was the principal. And he was a great guy. He had this big open car with all tops down. And at lunchtime, he would fill it with the kids and he'd take them to Elk Lake for a swim. And of course we all thought that was pretty nice.
Something else. Oh, and going to school at Mackenzie Elementary, we had to, we always would take a shortcut during the nice weather, and it was over fenced fields where Mr. Edge, who had a dairy farm on by Panama Flats, which was called for several years, and he would put his cattle to graze out in these fields, and we had to climb over 3 stiles in order to get up to Cary Road to go to Mackenzie. And we just hoped when we climbed over we wouldn't be stepping in something we shouldn't.
When we went to school, it was the Vancouver Island coach lines. There was no school buses then, no school buses, no district schools or anything like that.
And doing horse logging, and I'll show you a couple of pictures of horses we had. The first one lying down, he was a lazy old horse. He was old, and Ted and I could go work with him. The two of us were just kids, like we'd harness him up and walk underneath his belly. He was very trustworthy, and he only moved when you told him to. Other than that, he'd just stand there, or if he got a chance, he'd lie down.
Lynn telling me this little story, he was needing some help with roadside maintenance and hired John Chu. The job being finished, John said to Len, "One day I will repay this favor." And that day came when George returned to Victoria in 1957, George Farley that is, and was looking for work. Len remembered, John remembered, and George began his 37 years with Chu Excavating. Oh, those were the years where a gentleman's handshake was all it took.
And I remember working over here where McLaughlin's live now, off a pipeline. The name was Hamblets, used to work there. Lived there, I should say. And they had raspberries and logans and daffodils and tulips. And I used to work there for 8 cents an hour hoeing weeds, you know. And then I used to go and pick berries and Daryl's sister used to come, Barbara. She used to come and was working there too with me, picking berries. We didn't make too bad on making, strawberries and loganberries and stuff. And then you used to have to take the loganberries out there to Halliburton. On the highway, they used to have a grow-up place there, and they used to put them there. And then you take them down to the Lake Hill to the winery and make a wine out of them.
So rather than give up his paper route, I took it over for one winter. And so I did his paper route in the morning. I had to go up to Cunningham's to get it. That was about 4 or 5 miles. Then I biked to Mount Douglas High School and back. And then I did my own times route after that. And I put on about, are you feeling sorry for me? I put on about 30 miles a day at that year.
He fished on a purse seiner. That was one of his other jobs. 9-man crew, because it was all they had was a deck and a powered roller on the back, which helped them pull the net in. So it took a lot of guys, but they made some good sets in those days. They sometimes make a set and they had to let some go. They couldn't put it all on the boat. The rear deck would be awash. It would be just the coamings and the hatch sticking out. They'd tarp the hatch down and don't take it into fresh water, it sinks.
'49, he sold Dad a battery, $16, a new battery for the tractor. And he sold gas to Dad in 45-gallon drums for 49 cents a gallon. I thought you'd be interested to hear that. That's the days when we were still selling milk for 10 cents a quart.
What was the cost of a phone call to Victoria? Does anybody remember? How much?
Yeah. 10 cents to Victoria and 15 cents to Sydney.
Oh.
15 cents each, and then they went to 16 cents each and 2 for 31. And then Mr. Maltwood used to come down with his nurse to get a jelly donut. And until they went to 6 cents, and then he was refusing to spend that extra penny.
Elk Lake. Go across Brookley Road, and then there was a road up the west side there. It was a roller rink, and there was a Wurlitzer there, I think it was, and you put the money in. But that was the greatest thing. I think we could have had more of that. It was all big band music.
We used to go to McMorrin's dancing and stuff like that, and we never thought nothing of walking from Royal Oak to McMorrin's for a dance on Saturday night and walk home in the dark at night. Never thought anything of it. Go down to Beaver Lake, down the old pipeline road, back home,
And in the evening, you could maybe count anywhere from, 30 to 50 beach fires along the beach. In fact, it wouldn't be too long that the beech wood would run out on Cordova Bay Beach, so then they go up beyond to what we call Sayward Beach. That's the next long one.
Now, is your boyfriend in this one?
Boyfriend? Yeah, right there, Joe Robbins.
Fun we were having. It was just fun.
Well, we were all the same age, around the same age.
Yeah, we were just hoping some boy.
And we were friends.
Yeah, like some boy, like Chuck Ricky, that big dump truck, he'd go by. And if he saw us that we needed a ride, he'd drive us home, and he'd bring the big truck up. And we had a long driveway up to the house, and then a circular driveway in the house itself. And Dad would be out on that, working maybe in the garden. He'd say, he'd walk up to the young man and say, what's your name or address? And of course, the guy who was driving the truck would be so frightened. he wouldn't be able to answer. So we'd go in the house, and then my father would say, "Oh, that was an awfully stupid young man you were out with. Didn't know his name or address."
And he picked us up on Douglas Street there and gave us a ride up there. And then he asked us to see me the next day, so we went out. And of course, my motive was Morris had a hot car. He had a 52 Olds, 2-door hardtop. It was a pretty nice looking car. And I just wanted to make this guy that I just broke up, or we just broke up, I wanted to make him jealous. There was a motive, you know.
Like where the pool was here, you know, the Centennial Pool, but we owned all that property. And my dad lost all that property for taxes in the 30s because he didn't have any money to pay for it, and the municipality took so many acres a year for taxes to keep it. It whittled down to about, I think about 18 acres, which is down on Goyette Road there. And then
Which was in the 30s. You got to remember, in the 30s, nobody had any money. Like this one picture I tried to find of the school year. I said, "Mom, can I have 25 cents to buy a school picture?" She said, "No, you can't. We don't have 25 cents." Now,
the police were at the door and they picked me up. They were very nice. He said, "Have you had breakfast?" I said, "No." So the two of them took me for breakfast and got a hold of my mom, and my mom put me back on the bus. And I can remember her telling the bus driver, "Keep your eye on him," because when I got to Duncan, they had a stop there, and I almost got away, but I didn't. So I got back to the school. It was on a Sunday. Of course, they're all in the chapel. So I went in, and the sister said, "You go in there and stay there till the prayers are over." And I'm not a religious person, so don't misunderstand me. I don't have anything against it, but I figured to each his own. But I got down on my hands and knees in front of the crucifix and prayed that my dad would come and pick me up, and 20 minutes later he was there. Well, obviously he was already on his way. That was
We were told never to go down to the filter beds. So she went, you know what kids are like, and she fell in the water. She was about 2, I guess. Well, a good thing, a fishman used to come to our house to sell fish. I could see Glad turning over and over. So I thought I better get Mom or somebody. So the fishman was there. So he came and he got her out. Otherwise, Mom might have got her out, but yeah, that was a close call.
Up to 8 people on the line. They might answer the phone all at the same time. And you, as an operator, when you rang it, you had to stay and wait until it was properly answered. So you were dealing with people. "No, not you, madam." No. "Well, are you sure it's not for me? I've been waiting for a call all day long." "You're absolutely sure, operator, that it's for B on the line? I think it's R." Or they would get into a bit of shouting match between the neighbors as well. "Get off the line because I'm expecting a long distance call." So
there was a lot of dairy farms. There was over 100, we were called producer vendors, before the big dairy got established, all selling their own milk. It was quite interesting. All gone.
Joe's father, he used to deliver milk, and his slogan was "the only Bulls milk in town." But he was always at
We used to go up at the hay loft and build bales of hay, make a big fort, and ruin the bales. Yeah. We were lucky. We just.
And the farm across the street, which is now St. Joseph's church and school. He had quite a farm of Holstein cows, and he would save all the washings from the barn into a large cement tank, which he'd mix with water, and he would spray it on his fields, and he, instead of getting 2 crops a year, he managed 3. And in those days, if you wanted to go out or go to town, or you were working, like I was nearby, you could leave your windows open quite nicely. There weren't screens. And you would come home and the smell inside would be as bad as it was out. And sometimes there would be bits of straw and manure stuck on the outside of your house.
He was a very good plowman. Horses, not tractors. Clydesdales, those great big horses. Glad and I were so afraid of them. My dad had 13 of them.
In 1954, we bought the bog, that 96-acre bog. We owned it for about 10 years. But we used brush cutters and rotavators and half tracks on the Fordson tractors, and we ditched there and we pumped water like crazy so we can plant earlier for our crops. One time we had 2 tractors stuck, and a Copley bulldozer got stuck, and then finally he brought in heavier equipment, and took him 2 days to winch all that mess out of there. That bog was very treacherous. You had to be awfully careful around it. We lost a cow and down in there, and
And when you got off the bus at night, it was a dark place to walk. And especially during the war, when there was a brownout and people had to cover their windows to a point. It wasn't a blackout, but they called it a brownout. And
the other school had 2 classrooms in it. In those days, the soldiers would train, I guess, at the armies, and they'd have to walk from there all the way out to Heels Range to practice shooting, and then walk, and the bread gun carriers to go up the road and all that stuff, you know. Then you see them all walking back at night, you know. And they walked all the way, all the time. But you know, there was Alf Campbell. He went to war. He come back.
During the war years, Bruce, what was it like in Cordova Bay? Like when they had the air raid sirens and so on?
Any what?
Air raid sirens during the war?
Oh, they had, just off of Mount Douglas, they had a marker out on the water, and they used to dive bomb it, practicing from Pat Bay. And right across the road, actually, from where I live, one bomb got released a little bit too early. It went right through this woman's kitchen roof, and she was standing at the sink, and it didn't go off or anything. I wonder it didn't hit her. There was so many servicemen and their wives.
And during the war, we would go downtown and go to Air Force dances at Pat Bay, or Army dances. Some would be out towards Mary Hill, and we would go there, and the buses would take us out, and they would bring us back, and they would take us back downtown, and we would be back in town in time to catch the last bus home, which was probably 11:30. My husband was in the Navy.
Till later. Then there was the Women's Institute Hall next to that, and that place I hated, because that's where they had the dance classes. And my mother thought that I should learn to dance, and I should learn to square dance and everything else. And I thought it much more important that I learned to throw a curve playing baseball. So I managed to put up with that. And then
Morris used to, we talked about the Heatherbell kennels. Morris used to play the violin for the dogs. I'm not so sure he's proud of that. And he doesn't usually talk about it, but yeah, he used to play. And
there was a few people that I remember. There was Mrs. Mellish, was the piano teacher. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking Heather Bell Kennels. Is that right? Okay. God, I'm good. And she raised mastiffs. And I still can't play the piano because I'm sitting there petrified looking at this big mastiff over my shoulder. I could find middle C, and that was it, folks. I didn't really want to be near that dog.
I can always remember Massey's. You remember Massey's garage? Right down by the hall. Massey's, and the blacksmith man was there.
Do you remember who ran it?
Percy. Something.
Percy.
It would come to me in the middle of the night. Percy, yeah, he was there for years. And I think every time I go by there, I think of, the service station and the blacks.
But now, we were playing hockey in Victoria, and as we got off the coach lines on a Thursday evening, we had to hitchhike with our gear into the Memorial Arena. And we would play our hockey game and come out and get changed and grab our kit bags and hitchhike back home. Now that wasn't too bad, except it was on Quadra Street, because there was no Douglas Street, and there was no Pat Bay Highway. And hitchhiking in 1949, 50, 51, 52 on Quadra Street was really no roaring hell, except the people were wonderful. We walked it several times. But we also got rides several times. I'm not sure that would happen too much today.
Colquitt's Creek was a never-ending source of entertainment with, of course, kids and water. That's the way it was. And every year, it would overflow and form Quick's Pond. And it would, in a good year, it would actually run through into our place, in the corner of our bottom field would be wet, and Hawk's place behind or beside us would be wet halfway up.
I think I did. But I remember telling Morris when we first started dating, I says, "We have fish coming up here." I said, "No, you don't." Yeah, we do. He says, "They don't come up this far." I says, "Yeah, we have spawning fish up here." And the salmon would come up to Viaduct that were that large, spawning. That's gone.
But the best part about Quick's Pond, or Quick's Bottom, I think they call it now, each year it would freeze. It was cold in there in those days. There was snow. And of course, the pond would freeze over, and we'd skate for hours and end on it. We'd be absolutely frozen, couldn't feel our feet. Our hands weren't a whole lot better. And if it snowed, we'd plow or, scrape a hockey rink out or whatever it was. We couldn't skate where the dam, but some of them could. And when it got chewed up, there's how do you flood it? So we'd pump a bunch of hole in the ice and jump on it. The water would come up and we'd spread it around and it would freeze overnight. And of course, you're out there on a weekend and things are getting pretty thirsty, pretty hungry, and you might bring a sandwich down, but you never remember to bring any water, so you'd drink from the pond. Now, I know one young guy, and I think there's probably others, got the best dose of worms you ever saw. And they were so damned itchy, I almost drove my dad nuts when he was driving me to the hospital. It's just something I never really want to go through again.
We had such a good time growing up with the horses and the cows and the sheep, what have you. So I don't think many people know how busy the farm was when they came up from Hollywood to take me the movie. And they had Rin Tin up here for a while with his caretaker, and it was quite exciting. And I came home from a dance one night, and the whole, like it was a ballet, barnyard, I was all lit up in lights, and I thought it was on fire. We heard the rumors they were going to put a golf course all in around the swamp, we call it, what do they call it? A bog. So of course we knew that it was a bog because my dad lost a couple of cows when they couldn't find them. They were sinking down, you know.
And you know, every now and again, this woman would call New York, and we all got so excited. New York! You know, that was another world away. Of course, we never listened in on those. Anyway.
And we got caught home, taken home in the police car. And we were at the corner of Douglas and Cloverdale. And the cop had to stop because he got another call. So he got out of the car, you know, and of course they wouldn't do it today. But he left us two kids in that car with it running. So I said to Jack, I says, you know, we could actually take this car.
And we run up the road to where the train went by, and we played chicken too. You see, you got down to who was going to get as close as to the tracks as the other guy. And after school, we'd go up there and ask the foreman, can we use your hand car? They had one of these, you pumped it, you know, and once in a while I'd say, yeah, you can go down about as far as Kellows or about as far as Maddox, but I don't want you going any further than that. So that was the railway.
And then I can say that my uncle was a bootlegger, and he used to sell to your father-in-law.
Yeah.
It would be your father-in-law, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah. My dad used to say, uh-oh, there goes Josiah Bull up the hill. Yeah.
He said, I also remember finding an old length of 1.5-inch black polyethylene water pipe that we laid on the ground extending from the fort over towards the road where some large boulders were located. We put the end of the pipe out of sight under the boulders and found that when we yelled into the pipe from the fort, it sounded as if somebody was under the rocks. One weekend, we waited in our fort for some unsuspecting people to walk along Beaver Lake Road. We yelled into the pipe, help, help, I'm caught under here. Please help me, help, help. The people stopped and went over to the rocks, and we could see from our fort that they were trying to figure out how someone got under those rocks. It was great, he thought.
And my folks still didn't have a phone at that point. So they phoned the Polsons, and the Polsons had to come next door to tell my parents that their son was in the police station at Royal Oak. Had been arrested for disturbing the peace on Elk Lake. Well, my father was furious. The police delivered me back home because my dad refused to go down and get me. He was furious. I thought he was furious at the police. He was later, but he was furious at me.
You know, we used to be aware of the wife being alone, or, you know, after the husband had got off to work, suddenly the phone would ring and someone who sounded like a radio announcer would be talking. Hello, how are you?
Is it gone?
Yeah, is it gone? Yeah. Pat.
So we're underneath this bridge, and we're all smoking. So us boys come back to the house, and we go walking. My dad says, "How are the cigarettes, fellas?" We're thinking, see the smoke coming up under the bridge because we were
I never got in trouble with any of the police, but I should have. Should have.
My mother had a bee in her bonnet, amongst others, that you couldn't go swimming outside until the 24th of May weekend, whether it be the 23rd or whatever it fell on in those days. And of course, you know how much parents know when you're that old. So I remember coming home one day and my hair, I guess, was soaking wet. It was late for dinner, so I rushed it, came home and they said, how come your hair's wet? I said, oh, I fell in. Why aren't your clothes wet? Whoops.
I remember when we were at Telpin office, we decided we'd have a corn roast. We were having it up at my mom and dad's on Helm Road. So we went out the night before to steal corn. Well then, up, I think near where the distance ed school is now, there was a big corn patch. And Stella Kazokas was one of the girls that worked with us, and she could walk well. She had a bad leg. So she was to be the lookout while we went in and stole this corn. So anyway, we went and stole this corn, and we get out and we find out it's cow corn anyway. So we had to go buy it the next day anyway.
Yes, he always cooked the turkey. At Christmas time, he loved Christmas. He loved decorating the tree, and Christmas was wonderful at our house. And when we lived in the United States, our American friends, everybody wanted an invitation to Arthur and Marie's for Christmas dinner because they just loved the sort of Anglo tradition. They asked him how he cooked the turkey so well, and he said, well, I have a secret recipe. He said, I fill the cavity not only with stuffing, but raw popcorn. And when the apple blows off, I know it's ready.